It's a tier list video today because of course it is. Actually, this is one of your faults. So I had someone email me. I don't know when they emailed me, but I read it yesterday and I responded yesterday and I linked them to, I actually linked them to the Jubi one, www.jubi.one, which takes you to this page. If you guys didn't know this already, it's just a page with a bunch of links to a bunch of different stuff that I do. So I took them to this Summoners War Essentials playlist, which is what I wanted to direct them to. And then I was looking through that. I'm like, is there anything that's like super out of date that I shouldn't be directing them to? And then I saw an LD3 tier list from 3 years ago, and I was like, oh, this is all old. And I looked at some of the newer comments, and it's still YouTube is still recommending that list, that tier list to people. And I'm like, they're like, this is so garbage, this is a terrible tier list. I'm like, it's 3 years old. Half these units weren't even Second Awakened back then, so that's why the tier list makes no sense. So I am redoing that tier list today. That's why I asked you guys in the community post yesterday. For those of you that actually saw it, I was asking you guys your feedback on some 3-star monsters. So let's get the disclaimers out of the way. I don't know why I keep talking about whatever. Updated version of an old tier list made 3 years ago. Consider this a general guideline. Some of you may like a certain unit more or less than indicated on the tier list based on your specific playstyle and what content you like to focus on or avoid doing entirely. I'm talking about Guild Wars, Guild Siege, RTA, you know, the things that some of you just don't do at all. In addition to that, some of you may have very premium units, which may make some of the units on this list lose value, like the things at the top levels for you specifically, or you may be lacking some units, including meta 4 stars, which make, especially the things in the middle of the tier list, which may make some of these units more valuable for you specifically. Consider this a general guideline. Nothing is set in stone. Your feedback was already taken. Let me remove my face. It's already a better video. Yay. Your feedback was already taken into consideration from the community post that was done on the day before making this video. So I did put things higher than I normally would have, like, for example, Mantura and Varus the Dark Griffin, because a lot of you, well, a few of you mentioned them, and then some of you were upvoting the comments as well, talking about those units. So this is the tier list that was done a couple years ago, and people were commenting. By the way, make sure if you're looking at something that's like a tips or tricks or whatever, or guides or something, make sure that it's like relevant and up to date, because a lot of these units, like, let's actually take a look at some of these units here. We have this Dark Epicon Priest, for example, she wasn't Second Awakened, obviously, but she was buffed in a balance patch, so she's more useful than she was before. The Light Griffin is actually fantastic now, so as many people are, like, upset about, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because the Light Griffin is so low on the tier, it's like, this is a unit that completely changed over the course of 3 years. He was not that great at the beginning, and now he's so much, but he's significantly better, right? So something like this. Also, the Dark High Elemental was Second Awakened as well. These units, Gina and Linda, are fantastic now compared to what they were before. So a lot of these units are significantly better, or some of them might be worse or less relevant than they were before. Anyway, let's get on to the actual tier list. So this is the actual tier list. I had to rechange the layout and move my face so that you guys could actually see the whole thing. This is the bottom. We're going to go from the bottom to the top, and then we're going to zoom out at the very end. So at the bottom, we have the Infernos. By the way, if you guys see some of these things that are out of date, if I didn't mention this already, if you guys see some of these tier lists that are out of date or some guides out of date, just let me know. Just pay attention to the actual date that it was posted, just to make sure that it's relevant, or maybe it's super old, and just let me know, like, hey, this thing is out of date, so you might want to redo and make a new version of it, because I'm definitely always down to make newer, more updated versions of things if the information is incorrect, and then I will just unlist those old ones so that there's no misinformation out there. So, anyway, let's get back to the tier list. So we have F tier, the Infernos. Infernos are likely going to get Second Awakened. So this is most likely several months down the road. I don't know, 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. At some point down the road, going to change. They're probably going to be at least mid-tier or higher, because they're most likely going to get Second Awakened. And then we have some other things that are just, I mean, some people like to use this light Minotaurus. I've built him, I've used him. They're like, it's a budget chow. It's not a budget chow. It's not a budget chow. Get chow and then tell me it's a budget chow. The chow does not do the same things that this or Minotaurus does not do the same things that chow does. Maybe you can put him at D tier. Maybe I'm being too harsh on him, but a lot of the stuff is just hot nonsense garbage. Mummies are really, like, all this stuff I've built and is just not very useful. I know some people have used these things before, but I honestly, like, I've built this stuff. I'm not just saying, like, oh, I've never built this, but I think it's garbage. I'm like, I've built this. I've tried to squeeze content out of it, squeeze videos out of it. I'm like, this is bad. Even some of the stuff that you guys don't see on videos, like, sometimes it's just so bad that I'm like, I can't even make a video out of this. This is so bad. But yeah, this stuff is pretty much pointless. However, these Infernos, keep in mind that they are going to be significantly better at some point in time. And then we have this. I really like to use her, but she's, if I'm going to be honest, like, she's not that great, even though I like to use her. Some of these Second Awakened units I really don't feel are very good. This Cheryl, the Light Pixie, there's some instances where you could use her. It's just, like, Revivers in general are not very strong. And then we got the Nana meta. So, you compare anything to Nana or Tyrannus or Triana, it's not, or Perna, or, I mean, we're talking about like 3 stars. I mean, three-star LDs versus Nat 5s. It's not really a good comparison, but it's just, some people use her in Labyrinth. That's about it. Really, there's not too much to say about these things. Like, some of the, like this guy, he's an okay tank for R5 if you want to use him. Like this guy, like this Light Salamander, this Light Yeti is like a budget Artemil. However, his base stats are not that great. Second Awakened, though, that's a different story. Second Awakened, then we're talking significantly better. So that would be much higher on the tier list with just better base stats, or that does something more in the skills. I know some people like to use the Light Imp Champion. Personally, I just feel like this is a you can use it situation, but it's not like anything amazing. Some of these things, these do multi-hits. They do attack power breaks. I think one of these was good for a Rift Beast, if I recall correctly. Amon, I would love to say that Amon has stood the test of time. Amon, I think, was underrated at the very beginning. I mean, overrated at the very beginning. You don't really see too many people using. He's a light bruiser tank. I mean, you could. He's got heals. He's got provokes. You could use him. Again, these are things that you can use. There's better. There's just better stuff. We do have this is one of the highest damage dealing units in the entire game. However, you have to spend roughly the whole day to actually stack him enough to do crazy, ridiculous, insane damage. So it can technically do ridiculous things, but no one's going to sit around and do Guild Wars for 9.5 hours to make sure that he does 1 million damage. That's not... Okay, 5 people on the planet are going to do that to make sure that it does that much damage. This guy, they nerfed him. I don't know why they needed to nerf. They changed him. But ultimately, I feel that it was a nerf. I don't know if you guys feel that it was a nerf as well. These Charger Sharks, man, they got speed leads. So they could be, theoretically, pretty good if the skills were better. I mean, like, they need little tweaks could make them significantly better. Those speed leads could go a long way. If they had little tweaks, they could go much, much higher than this. Like the light one, I think, increases his attack bar when he kills something. So if he actually did more increased attack bar, like to 100%, that could be a different story. That could be pretty ridiculous combo, like how the Fire Inagami has some combo potential. C-tier stuff. So this is, remember we saw her very low on the tier list before. She is C-tier now. She's good for Siege. She's not the unit that you have to build. Some of these things, like she is anti-revive. This thing has to get hit multiple times to actually die. Miho is just so much stuff counters Miho now. She was fantastic when she was first Second Awakened. She was much higher on the tier list. She was much more meta in PvP, but now there's just like any Onimusha counters her, and then things that do damage based on pure damage, based on HP, things that don't crit. So, what else do we have? This is a cleanse and attack power buff. I actually think that this is a little bit underrated. This has a speed lead and also resets. He has a strip with skill 2. He has ignore defense with skill 1. He has a reset and stun with skill 3. This does ignore defense damage. That if you put invincibility on him, he will just have that access to that ignore defense continually. Then we have Jubel. I really like Jubel. Jubel's Second Awaken. If I'm gonna be completely honest, most of the value comes from using him in Guild Siege, which I think is fantastic. I think he's fantastic against the Twins defenses. So I use him nonstop in there. But if I'm going to be completely honest, like, do I see him being used in everything else? Like, not really. So he's kind of more of a niche unit. This Light Warbear, actually, he got changed. He got Second Awakened, and then he got changed at some point after that, the Second Awakened skills in a balance patch. We got Taru, which I think if he sees his Second Awakening is going to be pretty solid. He does ignore defense. He does some pretty good damage. He's got pretty good base speed, if I recall correctly, as well. And he has a 50% crit rate boost. Or crit rate, 50% increased crit rate with his skill 3, if I recall correctly. But this is just units that some people use him in 20-star Special League because he's got some pretty decent value being a 2-star in there. We've got Cassie, who's got niche uses. I mean, maybe I'm stretching Cassie. Maybe I'm not. See, here's the thing. Like, maybe I'm stretching some of the value of these units. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit because some people really like Taru, but it's like this niche group of people that like really enjoy Taru, and then you see them using it and you're like, that Taru is not giving you an amazingly high win rate. You know that, right? They're like, no, he's amazing. It's like, he's okay, it's just not giving you an amazingly high win rate. And they're like, no man, Taru, you don't even understand. I'm like, okay, it's not that he's bad, it's just that you can't just bring him in everywhere. This one, maybe I'm giving a little bit too much credit for some of these units. These martial artists, I think, are better than people give them credit for. I've built them. I've played with them. Like, all of these units I've built myself. So I think there's very few units in this entire game that I have not built myself. On all the accounts that I've ever had throughout the years, there's very few that I have not built. Then we have, for this tier, we have better than niche Guild War unit, but not quite meta. So just a little bit better than some of these things. I think that very few people actually have her built. This Dark High Elemental, she does a lot of damage. She crit buffs herself. She heals herself. She's actually better than people give her credit for. This Dark Harg has 120 base speed. He's very fast. He helps your team heal and turn cycle and decrease the attack bar of the bosses or enemies or whatever. If he did more, he would be significantly better. Like, I can't really put these too high on the tier list. Like, they're so close to being able to do more, but not quite ridiculous. So we have like things like Kabila or Tion, which are really good for, Lucian enablers or just attack bar enablers for like offense, but not that they're amazing for everything. Tion suffers from low base speed, does similar to the light Harg, but lower base speed. And then we have Kabila, which has crazy high base speed. Doesn't really provide much aside from the attack bar boost and a crazy high base speed. But we've got this. It's got the AoE cleanse. We have this. It's kind of like, Basalt has never been bad. He's just so much has gotten better than he is. This is another unit kind of similar to this Dark Bearman. This Dark Bounty Hunter has an AoE cleanse and attack power buff for 3 turns. He does... If the bounty hunter, if or when the bounty hunters get Second Awakened, they're going to be some of the best units, like some of the best 3-stars in the game, because they're some of them are kind of on the edge of being like, they're already useful at the level that they are. Cleanse, 3-turn attack power buff, ignore defense with skill 1, crazy multi hits with skill 2. This could be, it'll either get a minimal Second Awakening or it will be crazy overtuned. This one is used in some dungeon speed runs. He's not that, he's RNG, so he's not that crazy. You could make a definite argument that things like Jubel are better than things like the Dark Imp, that things like Miho are maybe more useful than something like Darien, based on based on how you play, how your play style is, what you value in terms of, do you value Arena, do you value Guild Wars, do you value PvE, and you don't really venture too much into PvP, etc., etc. Then we have A tier, which is, we've got Crow, because he's fantastic. And he's probably the best LD3 PvE unit. I'm trying to think of anything, because he does so much damage. He does so much single target damage against bosses. He's a boss destroyer, basically. Fantastic in every rift piece for the most part. We have this guy, the Dark Viking, is basically just for BJ5. That, for the most part, that's about it. This is good for TOA. You could argue that some of these units from the B tier are better than some of the units in the A tier, again, based on what you value in terms of which different areas of the game you like to play. Lynn is still pretty solid. She does good damage against bosses, especially like the water boss. things like that. She lacks value with her max. She does damage based on max HP with everything. I think if and when Lyn gets a second awakening, these are supposed to get second awakenings. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition, but the Amazons are supposed to get second awakenings, so Lyn and Mara should be ridiculous again. Maybe this is too high, because she kind of fell off, but she's still useful. You can still make dungeon teams with Lyn without really much of a problem. It's just people are just using dots and people are using Trikaru for a lot of things, so that's kind of why she fell out of meta. But she's still a good unit for dungeons. Dark Warbear is great for TOA, for controlling things. This is another unit for speedrunning dungeons. These two are from speedrunning dungeons. They were more useful back in the day. They're still useful, though, so there's nothing wrong with building them. I would argue that maybe you shouldn't put them in a tier list. You shouldn't put them at the same tier as Crow, though. I'm trying to, like, stick these into different layers based on a little bit of a, like, where they're good, but then that kind of skews the tier list in terms of, like, maybe these units are not as good, but I can't put them in, like, a Guild War thing, right? So, Zinc is also fantastic. Zinc has never been bad. He got a little bit better with the Steel Fortress, but he's never really been bad. Then we have the S tier units. So we've got both of these. I would personally consider the Shaman. Shaman got such a big buff. After the second awakening, he's so much more relevant than he ever was before. So I would consider Shaman to be pretty up there. I think Shaman is better than Varus personally, but I'm also going by some of the things that you mentioned in the community post. So that's why we've got Varus up here in the same tier as Shaman. But honestly, I feel like Shaman should be better. He's good in some guild content against dark units. He's also good in Necropolis. He's also good in... He's kind of a must build for the Dimension Cauldron, the rune farming dungeon. He's like a mandatory... Like, you have to use Shaman, basically. And there's some people that have just never pulled him. And he's like a mandatory... You can technically do it without him. It's just significantly harder. It's so much easier to actually use Shaman in that rune farming dungeon, because he heals so much, he does so much damage, he takes less damage from dark. Ridiculous unit in there. Bell is just great in everything. Bell is just a pocket knife unit, jack of all trades kind of thing. Darkrim Reaper is fantastic after the second awakening. Linda, the light mystic witch, is so much better after the second. It's just ridiculous. They even buffed the non-second awakened version of her. She was not really anything special. Gina was even worse. These girls got so much better after the second awakening. Thrain was useful before, but Shaman, Gina, Linda, all so significantly better after the second awakening. Some of these are also based on things that you guys wanted me to put higher, or things that you felt more valuable, like Mantora. Nothing wrong with Mantora. He's got a strip skill 1, he's got an AoE slow skill 2, and he's got a defense break skill 3. We've got Shren, heals, does ignore defense. There's so many uses for some of these things, not just like one or two places. We've got the Light Martial Cat. I feel like maybe this is a little bit high, but again, based on some of the things that you guys feel that I think she's a good unit, don't get me wrong. I think she's a good unit, but based on so many of you that like using her, Light Martial Cat. Also, Light Drunken Master is pretty solid. I think that with the base stats, apparently these Drunken Masters are not supposed to be second awakened. Again, we'll see. We'll see if things change down the road. We don't know exactly what Com2uS has in mind, but these are supposed to not be second awakened. The Jolton after the second awakening, and then we also have the double S. There's no triple S. I just put double S because I don't know why. Logically, I don't know why. And we've got Fran, we've got Lauren, we've got Ashir. Ashir is fantastic for everything. Fran and Lauren, immunity, attack, power buff, defense break, strip on Lauren. Did I say that wrong? Fran, immunity, attack, power buff, cleanse, attack, power break, attack gauge decrease. Fran's useful in like everything, basically. Lauren's useful in everything, basically. Ashir is useful in everything, basically. Like, there's no content really that you can say like, oh, these units are bad. Like even Ashir, people use in arena offense constantly. People use in RTA 4-star. He was the #1 pick in 4-star Special League. He's useful in Guild War offense, Guild War defense. You could bring him with bruisers. You could bring him in Dimension Hole. He's not a meta unit for dungeon teams, but you could bring him into dungeon teams and have effective teams with Ashir in it. Same thing with Fran, with Lauren. They're useful in Guild Wars, they're useful in Guild Siege, they're useful in RTA, they're useful in Dimension Hole content. They're just useful in so many different things. So this is the updated tier list for you guys that are curious. There you go. It's just a general guideline. I think that there is a lot of argument to be made that some of these units could be higher or lower based on what you value certain content in the game. But I just wanted to give a more updated, this is just a more accurate updated tier list than something that was done 3 years ago. And of course, we're going to have to redo it 6 months later when new units get Second Awakened. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys got something out of it. I will see you as always in the next one.